Silence is not always the absence of sound. Sometimes it is the presence of wisdom standing tall, shoulders back, eyes steady, refusing to bow to noise that was never meant to nourish the soul. When disrespect comes knocking loud and careless, it expects a reaction. It expects fire to meet fire, a wounded echo to answer its call. But there is a deeper power in choosing stillness, in allowing quiet to do the work that anger promises but rarely fulfills. Disrespect tries to shrink you. It speaks in tones meant to bruise dignity, in gestures that hope to make you forget who you are. It arrives uninvited and often disguised as honesty, humor, authority, or familiarity. It wants you to feel small, to second-guess your worth, to trade your grace for momentary relief through retaliation. But there is a sacred strength in remembering that you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to, and you do not have to answer every voice that calls your name with ill intent. Staying quiet after disrespect is not weakness dressed up as virtue. It is discernment choosing its battles. It is self-respect refusing to be dragged into the mud to prove its cleanliness. When you stay quiet, you are not saying that what happened was acceptable. You are saying that you are valuable enough not to cheapen your spirit by wrestling with ignorance. You are saying that your peace is not for sale, not even at the high price of being right. There is a myth that silence means surrender. But silence, when chosen, is a declaration. It declares that you know the difference between noise and truth. It declares that you trust the arc of life to correct what human hands sometimes distort. It declares that you are rooted deeply enough to let storms pass without uprooting your sense of self. Silence in this way becomes a language spoken fluently by those who know their worth. Karma does not need your assistance. It is not fueled by your rage or guided by your revenge. It moves on a timetable that may not satisfy impatience, but it rarely misses its destination. When you step back and let karma speak, you are allowing life to balance itself in ways more precise than any retaliation you could design. You are trusting that what is planted will eventually rise, and what is thrown with cruelty will return with lessons attached. There is a particular dignity in walking away from disrespect with your head held high and your heart intact. It unsettles those who expected a spectacle. It confuses those who were prepared for a fight. It exposes the emptiness of their actions, because cruelty loses its audience when met with calm. Your quiet becomes a mirror, reflecting their behavior back to them without commentary, without embellishment, without mercy or malice. Staying quiet does not mean storing pain inside until it poisons you. It means processing your hurt in spaces that are safe, with people who are kind, in moments that are honest. It means choosing healing over performance. You can acknowledge the wound without reopening it in public. You can name your feelings without handing them to the very person who caused them. Silence here is not repression, it is protection. There will be times when your quiet is misunderstood. Some will say you should have spoken up, clapped back, defended yourself more loudly. They may confuse volume with courage, but courage sometimes whispers. Courage sometimes says, I know who I am, and I do not need to announce it to those committed to misunderstanding me. Courage sometimes walks away so that tomorrow can be met without the weight of yesterday's unnecessary battles. When disrespect comes from those close to you, the silence can feel heavier. It can feel like betrayal to your own heart to say nothing. But even then, quiet can be an act of love toward yourself. It creates space to see clearly, to decide what boundaries must be drawn, what conversations are worth having, and what relationships require distance to survive. Silence gives you time, and time gives you clarity. Karma speaks in consequences, not in words. It speaks when patterns reveal themselves, when masks slip, when actions accumulate and form a reputation that no excuse can erase. You do not need to narrate this process. You do not need to sit in the front row applauding its arrival. Often the most powerful position is to be elsewhere, living well, growing freely, untouched by the chaos you refuse to entertain. There is freedom in not needing the last word. The last word is often overrated, heavy with ego and thin on wisdom. Letting go of it can feel like setting down a burden you did not realize you were carrying. You discover that peace weighs less than pride, and that joy arrives more easily when it is not delayed by constant defense. Your quiet teaches people how to treat you more effectively than arguments ever could. It says that disrespect does not earn access, attention, or intimacy. It says that you are listening, observing, remembering, even when you are not responding. It says that you value yourself enough to reserve your voice for conversations that can grow something good. There is also a lesson in trusting that not everyone deserves an explanation. Some people ask questions not to understand but to argue, not to heal but to wound. Silence closes the door gently but firmly. It refuses to provide material for further harm. It is a boundary drawn without bitterness. When you stay quiet, you give yourself the gift of perspective. You begin to see that many acts of disrespect are rooted in insecurity, fear, or unresolved pain. This understanding does not excuse the behavior, but it releases you from carrying it personally. You recognize that what was said or done was more about them than about you, and that realization loosens the grip of hurt. Karma also speaks through your growth. It speaks when you rise beyond environments that tried to belittle you. It speaks when your life becomes fuller, your laughter more genuine, your days more aligned with your values. Success lived quietly is often the loudest response. Healing is a language that needs no translation. Choosing silence requires trust, and trust requires faith in yourself. Faith that you are strong enough to endure discomfort without turning it into cruelty. Faith that your worth is not defined by how well you argue or how sharply you respond. Faith that your life is bigger than a single moment of disrespect. There will be days when staying quiet feels like swallowing fire. On those days, remember that fire can forge or destroy. You are forging patience, resilience, and self-control. You are learning to sit with discomfort without letting it dictate your actions. This is not easy work, but it is noble work. Silence also invites reflection. It asks you to examine why certain words hurt, why certain situations trigger anger, why certain people have power over your emotions. In this reflection, you find opportunities to heal old wounds, to strengthen boundaries, to choose yourself more consistently. Disrespect becomes a teacher, though an unwelcome one, guiding you toward deeper self-awareness. Letting karma speak does not mean waiting passively for justice while enduring ongoing harm. It means removing yourself from spaces where disrespect is normalized. It means choosing distance over drama, peace over proximity. Silence pairs best with action that protects your well-being. You can be quiet and decisive at the same time. There is elegance in restraint. It shows in the way you carry yourself, in the way you refuse to be rushed into reactions that do not serve you. It shows in your ability to listen without absorbing, to observe without imitating. This elegance is often mistaken for indifference, but it is actually intentional living. When karma finally speaks, it often does so softly too. It may arrive as regret in someone else's heart, as loneliness where entitlement once lived, as consequences that cannot be argued away. You do not need to witness it to know it exists. Your job was never to deliver the lesson, only to learn your own. Staying quiet preserves your energy. Anger is expensive. It drains creativity, dulls joy, and clouds judgment. Silence, chosen wisely, is economical. It saves your strength for dreams, for love, for building a life that reflects your deepest values rather than your loudest wounds. Your quiet is not empty. It is full of intention, full of self-respect, full of an unspoken understanding that life has a way of settling its accounts. When you let karma speak, you are not silencing yourself forever. You are choosing the right moment, The right audience, the right purpose for your voice. And when you do speak, when the time is aligned and the heart is steady, your words will carry weight. They will not be rushed or reckless. They will be rooted in truth rather than reaction. Until then, let your silence be a sanctuary, a shield, a statement of who you are becoming. Stay quiet not because you are afraid, but because you are aware. Let karma speak not because you are passive, but because you are powerful enough to trust the balance of life. In this quiet, you honor yourself, you protect your spirit, and you make room for a future that does not need to shout to be heard. Quiet boundaries are not announced with raised voices or sharp declarations. They are lived, practiced, and reinforced through consistency. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you are not closing your heart. You are closing a door that was letting the cold in. A quiet boundary does not ask for permission. It does not plead for recognition. It simply exists, steady and firm, shaped by self-awareness and self-respect. There is a strength in deciding what you will no longer tolerate, and then honoring that decision without performance. Loud boundaries often invite argument, negotiation, and defiance. Quiet boundaries leave no such opening. They are felt rather than debated. When you withdraw your energy from disrespect, when you stop engaging with behavior that drains you, the message lands more clearly than any speech could deliver. People notice when access changes, when availability disappears, when warmth is replaced by distance. Quiet boundaries require honesty with yourself first. You must be willing to admit where you have been overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending. Many people struggle not because they lack boundaries, but because they keep breaking their own. They say they are done, yet they return. They say they deserve better, yet they accept less. A quiet boundary begins the moment you decide to align your actions with your values, even when it feels uncomfortable. There is fear that comes with silence, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being labeled cold, difficult, or unforgiving. But quiet boundaries are not about punishing others, they are about protecting your inner life. You are allowed to choose peace without writing a thesis about it. You are allowed to step back without narrating every reason. Your well-being does not require a committee vote. When someone disrespects you, they often expect a reaction. They expect you to defend, to explain, to fight for your place. Quiet boundaries disrupt that expectation. They remove the stage. Disrespect loses its momentum when it no longer receives attention. What remains is the truth of the behavior, standing alone without your emotional labor to soften it. Quiet boundaries teach people how to treat you by showing them what access costs. Not everyone deserves the same level of intimacy, trust, or responsiveness. When you begin to adjust your presence instead of your standards, clarity follows. You reply less, you share less, you invest less. This is not cruelty, it is calibration. You are measuring what is given and responding accordingly. There is a deep kind of maturity in choosing not to explain your growth to those who benefited from your silence before. Some people are comfortable with you only when you are accommodating, quiet in a way that serves them, flexible at your own expense. When you shift into a quiet boundary, their discomfort becomes evident. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming distant, of being selfish. What they are really mourning is the loss of access they once took for granted. Quiet boundaries are especially powerful because they are hard to manipulate. Words can be twisted, intentions questioned, emotions exploited. Behavior is harder to argue with. When you stop showing up where you are not respected, when you stop engaging in conversations that go nowhere, when you stop offering vulnerability to those who misuse it, the boundary stands on its own. This kind of boundary does not seek to control others. It accepts that you cannot change people, only your proximity to them. It releases the exhausting need to be understood by everyone. Understanding becomes optional, respect becomes required. In that shift, you reclaim time, energy, and emotional clarity. Quiet boundaries also create space for discernment. You begin to see who respects you without constant reminders, who adjusts their behavior without being forced, who notices the shift and responds with accountability rather than entitlement. Silence reveals character. Some will step closer with care. Others will fall away in frustration. Both outcomes are information. There is grief in setting boundaries quietly. You may miss the version of yourself that tried harder, explained more, hoped longer. You may grieve relationships that only functioned when you were silent in the wrong ways. But that grief is part of shedding a skin that no longer fits. Growth often requires leaving behind dynamics that depended on your discomfort. Quiet boundaries do not mean you never speak up. They mean you choose when your voice matters. They mean you reserve your explanations for those who listen, your vulnerability for those who protect it, your energy for spaces that allow you to breathe. Silence becomes intentional rather than forced. There is also humility in quiet boundaries. You recognize that not every wrong deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Some people are committed to their version of you, and arguing only strengthens their attachment to it. Silence lets reality do the work. Over time, patterns speak louder than protests. Living with quiet boundaries changes how you move through the world. You become less reactive, more observant. You notice how your body responds to certain people and situations. You trust those signals. You stop overriding your intuition to keep the peace. You understand that peace kept at the cost of self-respect is not peace at all. Quiet boundaries require patience. They do not produce instant validation. Sometimes they are met with resistance before respect. Sometimes they are met with silence of their own. But within that space, something steadier grows. Confidence rooted in self-trust. Calm that does not depend on external approval. A sense of dignity that does not rise and fall with how others treat you. When your boundaries are quiet, your life becomes louder in more meaningful ways. Your focus sharpens. Your joy feels cleaner. Your relationships deepen with those who meet you with care rather than consumption. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth through endurance. Quiet boundaries speak through consistency, through absence, through changed behavior. They speak when you choose yourself without apology. They speak when you let go without bitterness. They speak when you stop arguing with reality and start aligning with truth. Growth is a response that requires no announcement. It does not arrive with arguments or explanations, and it does not seek validation from those who once doubted you. Growth happens quietly, often unnoticed at first, but it changes everything. When you choose to grow instead of react, you shift the entire direction of your life. You stop feeding situations that were never meant to nourish you, and begin investing in becoming someone who no longer fits inside old patterns. When faced with disrespect, many feel pressure to respond immediately, to defend their worth, to prove their strength through confrontation. But growth asks a different question. It asks what kind of person you want to become after the moment has passed. It asks whether winning an argument is more important than protecting your peace. Growth understands that some battles shrink you even when you win them. Choosing growth as a response means refusing to let someone else's behavior dictate your character. It means deciding that your future deserves more attention than your anger. While others remain stuck replaying the moment, rehearsing comebacks, and carrying resentment like a badge, growth pulls you forward. It turns your focus inward, not in self-blame, but in self-refinement. Growth is uncomfortable because it requires honesty. You begin to see where you tolerated too much, where you ignored your intuition, where you stayed silent in ways that harmed you and loud in ways that drained you. This awareness can sting, but it is also liberating. You stop needing someone else to change in order for you to move forward. There is power in outgrowing environments that once made you feel small. Growth shows up when you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to people who never listen. It shows up when your standards rise quietly, and your tolerance for disrespect falls just as quietly. You begin to choose differently, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Growth does not chase closure from those who caused harm. It creates its own closure through understanding and release. You realize that some people will never apologize, never reflect, never take responsibility. Growth accepts this reality without surrendering to it. It frees you from waiting for accountability that may never come. As you grow, your reactions change. What once triggered rage now barely registers. What once demanded a response now feels irrelevant. This is not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about yourself. Emotional maturity often looks like indifference to what once consumed you. Growth sharpens discernment. You begin to notice patterns earlier. You see red flags without needing to collect them all. You trust your instincts instead of talking yourself out of them. This awareness saves you time, energy, and heartache. It allows you to walk away sooner, before damage takes root. There is also humility in growth. You understand that you are still learning, still shedding layers, still becoming. You stop demanding perfection from yourself and others. You recognize that growth is not linear and that setbacks do not erase progress. Each experience becomes information rather than a verdict on your worth. Growth changes how you measure success. It is no longer about being admired, praised, or proven right. It becomes about alignment, about whether your actions match your values, about whether your life feels honest when no one is watching. This internal measure brings a steadiness that external approval never could. When growth is your response, silence becomes natural rather than forced. You no longer bite your tongue to appear strong. You simply have less to say to situations that do not deserve your voice. Your energy is redirected toward learning, healing, building, and becoming. Growth also reshapes relationships. Some people cannot follow you into the version of yourself that no longer accepts disrespect. They may resist, criticize, or distance themselves. Growth allows you to let this happen without chasing or resentment. You understand that not everyone is meant to grow with you. In choosing growth, you stop keeping score. You no longer wait for karma to prove you right in visible ways. Your growth becomes its own justice. The peace you feel, the boundaries you maintain, the life you build all speak louder than vindication ever could. Growth is patient. It does not rush outcomes or demand immediate results. It understands that real change takes time, repetition, and compassion. You begin to invest in habits, environments, and people that support who you are becoming rather than who you were forced to be. As you grow, your confidence deepens. It no longer needs to be loud or performative. It is rooted in self-trust. You know that you can handle discomfort without losing yourself. You know that you can walk away from disrespect without abandoning your dignity. Growth reframes pain. Instead of asking why something happened to you, you begin asking what it taught you, not in a way that excuses harm, but in a way that extracts wisdom. Pain becomes a teacher rather than a prison. When growth is the response, your life expands. New opportunities appear because you are no longer entangled in old emotions. Your mind clears, your goals sharpen. Your energy returns to you. You stop leaking yourself into situations that do not deserve you. Growth also teaches restraint. You realize that not every truth needs to be spoken, not every realization needs to be shared. Some transformations are sacred and personal. You let them mature within you before offering them to the world. Choosing growth is choosing yourself repeatedly, even when it is lonely, even when it is misunderstood, even when it requires letting go of familiar pain. It is deciding that your future matters more than your past wounds. It is responding to disrespect not by becoming harder, but by becoming wiser. Growth does not seek revenge. It seeks elevation. It lifts you out of cycles that once defined you. It changes your internal dialogue. It replaces self-doubt with self-respect. It teaches you to respond to life rather than react to people. In the end, growth is the quiet decision to keep becoming, to keep refining, to keep choosing a life that reflects your values rather than your injuries. It is the most effective response because it transforms you, and when you change, everything around you changes with you. Anger feels powerful in the moment. It rises fast, fills the chest, sharpens the tongue, and convinces you that release is the same as relief. But anger is loud and short-lived, while consequences are quiet and lasting. When you choose to let consequences speak instead of anger, you are choosing endurance over explosion, wisdom over impulse, and truth over theater. You are allowing reality to respond where emotion once rushed in too quickly. Anger demands an audience. It wants to be seen, heard, validated. It wants someone to feel what you felt, to hurt the way you were hurt. But consequences do not need attention to be effective. They unfold naturally, shaped by patterns, habits, and choices repeated over time. When someone disrespects you and you respond with anger, the focus shifts to your reaction. When you step back and let consequences do the talking, the focus remains on their behavior. Letting consequences speak requires restraint, and restraint is not passive. It is active self-control practiced in moments when reaction feels justified. It is choosing not to pour gasoline on a fire that will eventually burn itself out. It is understanding that anger often gives people exactly what they want: engagement, chaos, and an excuse to avoid accountability. Consequences are rooted in cause and effect. They are impartial. They do not shout or threaten. They simply arrive. When someone repeatedly disrespects boundaries, they lose access. When someone lies, trust erodes. When someone mistreats others, relationships weaken. None of this requires your anger to function. In fact, anger often interferes, softening consequences by shifting blame or creating distractions. There is clarity in stepping aside and allowing reality to respond. You begin to see that you do not have to convince anyone of anything. You do not have to prove harm or justify distance. Actions speak continuously, even when you are silent. Over time, people reveal who they are through consistency, and consequences respond accordingly. Anger is exhausting. It consumes energy that could be used for healing, building, or resting. It keeps you emotionally tethered to the very situation you want to escape. Letting consequences speak allows you to detach. Detachment is not indifference. It is freedom from emotional entanglement. You stop rehearsing arguments in your head. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop reliving moments that no longer deserve space in your mind. Choosing consequences over anger also protects your integrity. Anger can push you to say things you do not mean, to act in ways that do not reflect who you want to be. Consequences require no compromise of character. You remain aligned with your values while life handles the correction. This alignment builds self-trust. You know you can face disrespect without losing yourself. There is often fear in this approach. Fear that silence will be mistaken for acceptance. Fear that without confrontation nothing will change. But consequences do not rely on confrontation to function. They rely on consistency. When you stop rewarding bad behavior with attention, access, or emotional labor, change happens naturally. Either behavior adjusts or distance grows. Both are outcomes that restore balance. Letting consequences speak also removes the need for revenge. Revenge keeps you locked in the same emotional space as the harm. It ties your peace to someone else's downfall. Consequences free you from that dependency. You no longer need to witness regret or remorse. You no longer need validation through suffering. Your peace becomes self-contained. This approach demands patience. Consequences rarely arrive on the schedule anger prefers. Anger wants immediate justice, instant acknowledgement. Consequences take time because they are cumulative. They build quietly, often unnoticed, until they can no longer be ignored. Trusting this process means accepting delay without doubt. There is dignity in refusing to explain yourself repeatedly. When you let consequences speak, you stop narrating your pain. You stop offering evidence to those who already decided not to care. You let behavior stand on its own. Over time, patterns become undeniable. Words fade, but patterns remain. Letting consequences speak does not mean tolerating ongoing harm. It means removing yourself from harm without dramatizing the exit. It means choosing distance over debate. Silence becomes a boundary, not a surrender. Your absence becomes information. Anger often escalates situations that would otherwise resolve themselves. It hardens defenses, invites counterattacks, and deepens division. Consequences de-escalate. They allow space for reflection. They force accountability without force. When someone realizes that their behavior resulted in loss, limitation, or isolation, the lesson lands deeper than any argument could deliver. This approach also teaches discernment. You begin to see who responds to boundaries with respect and who responds with entitlement. You notice who takes responsibility and who looks for someone to blame. These observations guide your future choices more accurately than emotional reactions ever could. Letting consequences speak reshapes your internal dialogue. Instead of asking how to respond, you ask how to protect your peace. Instead of asking how to be heard, you ask where you are valued. This shift moves you from reaction to intention. Anger narrows perspective. Consequences widen it. You start seeing the bigger picture, the long game, the life beyond this moment. You recognize that your energy is finite and deserves to be spent on growth rather than grievance. There is also compassion in this choice, though it may not look like it. Consequences allow people to face themselves without your interference. Sometimes anger delays growth by providing excuses. Consequences remove those excuses. They let reality teach what words could not. Letting consequences speak requires confidence in your worth. You must believe that you do not need to fight to be respected. You must trust that walking away does not make you invisible. It makes you unavailable to disrespect. This confidence grows with practice. Over time, you notice a shift. Situations that once triggered anger now trigger clarity. You respond less, observe more. You conserve your voice for moments that matter. Your life becomes quieter, not from suppression, but from stability. Consequences also protect your future. Anger leaves traces. Words said in anger linger. Actions taken in anger create ripples. Consequences leave clean lines. They close chapters without chaos. They allow you to move forward without looking back in regret. This approach does not deny emotion. It acknowledges anger without obeying it. You can feel hurt, disappointment, frustration, and still choose restraint. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to choose response. Letting consequences speak shifts power dynamics. Anger often gives power away by revealing how deeply affected you are. Consequences reclaim power by making your response unpredictable and grounded. You become less reactive, more sovereign. You also begin to trust yourself more. Each time you choose restraint, you reinforce the belief that you can handle discomfort without collapsing into reaction. This self-trust becomes a foundation for confidence that does not depend on external validation. There is a quiet satisfaction in watching your life improve while others remain stuck repeating patterns. Not out of superiority, but out of relief. You realize that you chose differently, and that choice mattered. Letting consequences speak instead of anger is a commitment to long-term peace over short-term release. It is choosing to live above the noise rather than inside it. It is understanding that the most powerful responses often leave no fingerprints. Over time, you stop seeing this as a strategy and start seeing it as a way of being. Calm replaces chaos. Intention replaces impulse. You no longer need to defend your silence because your life reflects the strength behind it. Consequences continue to unfold whether you watch them or not. Your role becomes simpler. Live honestly, set boundaries, withdraw from disrespect, invest in what nourishes you. Allow life to respond accordingly. In that space, anger loses its authority, and something steadier takes its place, something rooted in self-respect, patience, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you chose peace without abandoning your truth.